Good day.
Cool.
Good morning, Just.
Yes. Good morning. Wait, it's still morning there, isn't it?
Just.
In 7 seconds, it's the afternoon.
Mm.
Cool. Topic for today. By the way, we've been off with our last podcast. So actually, the last one I think was 18.
Oh, we're ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. So this is 19. The world is slowly coming to an end. It is in as blatant fashion as it could possibly be, of course, and it still amazes me how I love this word. It reminds me of the band Jamiroquai. Soliloquy of society is slowly grasping further and further into the chasm of unconsciousness. And I guess our topic for today is going to be somewhat aligned to that, off of how much of Decoding Your Realities video have you watched, this recent one?
Only a third. I'm a third of the way through.
But I mean, when you hit the end in that video, and then for the audience, by the way, if you don't know who Decoding Our Reality is, it's a channel. Just input that into YouTube, and you'll see a guy that basically looks at the symbolism, but primarily like numbers, numerology, gematria, that kind of stuff. And yeah, he kind of forwards his prediction on whatever it is that's currently happening, but also essentially what is the kind of end game of this whole kind of debacle. And yeah, his latest one is insanely on point, especially the end, the kind of wrap up, the conclusion. It's quite amazing. But I shan't spoil it for you, James. It's like a movie. I'll let you organically absorb that.
I'm rubbing my hands together in anticipation for their crescendo of his latest offering, because
Do you know who else rubs their hands together?
the Shylocracy.
Indeed. So I guess what was the actual topic going to be? Do you know what it could be? We could introduce it, the rape trial. Just a little overview, not the trial itself, just the behaviours of certain people. I'm sure the audience would be quite, interested in such a thing.
Shall I work of the 80% of the norm, the 90% even?
Yeah, indeed. Long story short, of course. I was involved in a jury member for this kind of rape trial, and it was very basic, the premise of the case. It was very, very simple. There was a man and a woman. They were in a relationship for 9 months. They broke up. A year later, they got back together for a one-night thing. She then said that it was rape, and he said it wasn't rape. The end. No evidence as such, unless you classify testimony as evidence. Testimony is officially evidence, though I don't see it as evidence. And regardless, it's one person's word against the next. So really, it's just defeating. There's no physical evidence. There's absolutely nothing that would assert that one party is wrong. One says they did, one says they didn't. The end. So regardless of this very simple case, the 12 jury members were actually primarily female, which is strange. I always thought it had to be an equal mix, and maybe I'm wrong actually, but it certainly seemed like it was 7 or 8 females. Either way, all ages of characters, and it wasn't just the women that turned out to be crazy, by the way. Everyone in this case was a complete and utter pimp soul, and irrespective of the fact that thankfully we got a not guilty verdict. But this, by the way, had to go to a hung jury, and the judge had to overrule, because it was actually 10 in favour of not guilty and 2 in favour of guilty. And the 2 people that were in favour of guilty were it was like theatre, audience, please. It was really like theatre. It was like a parody. I can't believe we live in a reality an open feminist and a complete psychopathic lady who wasn't even interested in discussing the case, or she was basically doing her nails on the camera. And every time the vocalist, the orator, the speaker would ask her, you know, what do you think about the case? Could you give your reasons as to why you think this man's guilty? She would just say, I think he's guilty. He did it. And the other lady was openly sexist. And I'm surprised people don't get chucked out of, you know, jury things for this kind of thing. Yeah, she basically just said, well, no, that's the kinds of things men do. He looks guilty. He obviously did it, blah, blah, blah. We even had an instance where a lady that eventually did submit to the non-guilty verdict, a guy was randomly talking, the orator, the kind of lead speaker, he was randomly talking about something pertaining to a specific part of the case. And out of nowhere, in PTSD style, and none of these people should have PTSD, by the way, none of these people should have any links to a rape whatsoever, to keep the case as, you know, as kind of foolproof as possible, so there's no bias in there. She just randomly starts screaming, no means no, no means no. This is happening. She just starts screaming this out of nowhere. There was no context for it. The guy was talking about something completely unrelated, and she's like, no means no, no means no. I'm like, this is a fucking case, a rape case. And yeah, no one has any evidence to suggest that one party is, is guilty and one party is not guilty. That's just the reality of the case. In the end, with the convincing, as I said, it did go through 10 to 12, but this is where it gets unbelievably comical, right? So we had to convince the minority of ourselves that obviously, you know, there was no evidence to substantiate, and therefore non-guilty was an absolute. You know, you have to believe that the person is guilty beyond all measure. It's not up to the legal system to prove that the innocent party is innocent. You have to prove that the person, you know, stating that they've been raped is 100% right. Essentially, that's what I'm saying. And when it went through, they said, we think that he's guilty. This is basically verbatim, by the way. We think that he's guilty. However, because there's no evidence to suggest that, we are forced to put in a non-guilty verdict. Do they not understand that they've just contradicted themselves? How fucking stupid can they be that in one sentence they've just acknowledged that there is no evidence to suggest that this person is guilty, yet they think he's guilty? Well, therefore, if you think he's guilty, you think he's guilty because your own bias and your own opinion is completely tainted with sexism and all kinds of discriminatory belief systems. Because if you're asserting that someone is guilty without the evidence to substantiate that claim, then it can only fall back on one thing, and that is a personal vendetta against said individual or said type of individual, often known as discrimination. And it's unfucking believable to me. And how insane it was that even after all this, when it went down to the end, the speaker, who was a man in this case, was also completely sexist. So this guy was, you know, for the non-guilty, and it was non-guilty 100%, but he made all kinds of comments like, you know, she just wanted her panties off, like she was totally down for it. Like this guy literally said that in the case. So it wasn't just one side of the party, though. In the end, of course, the people responsible for giving a verdict based on any substance whatsoever, and other than their own fucking personal, you know, discriminatory beliefs, is obviously worse. But still, like, basically the entire jury, bar myself and maybe one guy and one girl, so three of us, were fucking psychos, and they were willing to put someone in prison for a very long time without any evidence, just because they are fucking, you know, anti-men. Basically, it was just filled with all kinds of atypical fucking, you know the types, audience, you know the types. We don't have to go on. So yeah, that's just a little intro as something that I had to partake in very recently.
Yeah, and
what do you think about that, James?
I mean, what I find interesting about that is how the makeup in itself can be slanted towards, because it's such an emotive subject, isn't it? You know, rape, and you know the majority of the people on the jury are females. Obviously, that lends to what some would deem a quote unquote natural bias. I think everybody should have the ability to be objective, but the fact of the matter is that we are emotional beings, and people, if somebody has a relation to certain circles, I don't know, i.e., you grew up watching your mum and dad, fighting, your dad beating up your mum, then a guy is accused of domestic violence, but there's not that much evidence, but you might be inclined to say, oh, he done it because I've seen that sort of behavior before. And like that woman that was saying, oh, no, no, no means no, probably triggered by,
Oh,
I don't
mate, like, it was insane. Should
know.
be fucking thrown out.
Yeah, because you've shown I mean, fully agreed. I think if you show that you have, like you said, PTSD or some kind of like compromised sense of rationality and cognition, you should not be in charge of making a decision on somebody's life. And then on top of that, I think the demographic of case of the jury should match the crime, i.e., if there is, I don't know, like a guy that's accused of um, doing a racially motivated murder against a black person, the jury shouldn't be all black, like especially all black women, because women are um, rationally more objectively more emotional than men, or have a certain type of emotional response that's different to men, and they're just more likely to make decisions based on emotions. This is a fact. This is like a scientific fact. There's millions of books about it, like what women will even admit this, women will tell you this. So if it's like when it comes to things like rape and all of this, Me Too, and say no, and no means no, and all of these things.
Wait, what is SAMO? What is that? Never heard of it.
Me Too, no, no means no, no means
Oh,
no.
right.
Yeah, and all of this. Yeah, I just feel like yeah, that there needs to be due care given to those who are accused of offences, because it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, right? But yeah,
Well.
that's
One of the ladies, by the way, sorry to interrupt. One of the ladies verbatim said that she goes by the rule that you always believe the victim first. I know. I should have turned around and said, "Well, I think you raped me the other day."
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, always believe the victim, or always believe the alleged victim, because somebody's only a victim if it's proven that that somebody did something. So at this point, it's just like a clean slate, and even the fact that even that use of language shows where their mind's at. I believe the victim first, not I believe the alleged victim, like, or I'm inclined to believe the alleged victim. It's just like so blasé. I believe the victim first. It's like, yeah, it just shows that
and
yeah,
if the victim was a man, of course, it's not applicable. She
yeah,
would
they're
only
not
rule in favour
anymore.
of ladies, naturally. Yeah. And it's the part of that case. I actually thought that was one of the most scary experiences ever, to because it was like a parody, to witness where we're at now in society. And going back to what you said about people there should be a better system for filtering out those with like clear mental illnesses like PTSD or whatever. Shouldn't be allowed on cases, absolutely. The problem is it seems to be everybody now that has a mental illness, and not just because a lot of people use that card as a golden ticket to, I don't know, get fucking free money, or get out of doing work, or get better grades at university, because you get all kinds of benefits to utilizing these kinds of cards. But actually, I think so many people actually do have this. I think society has been demoralized so intentionally for so long. We can see that clearly by the generations around us now. The younger generation are weak, betaized, incompetent fools that can barely cook pasta, and let alone be able to stand up for a criminal in the street that's mugging an old lady. They much rather stand there and get the YouTube clicks than actually support that kind of scenario, and make society a better place. And of course, with all of this, again, all intentional, derivative of kind of capitalism, we are left in a situation where we ourselves, as people, let's assume and state, actually, at least for me and you, James, that we're all outnumbered. We're all outnumbered, and it's us that is affected by this, because we are the enemies as far as they're concerned, because we don't sponsor cutting off kids' genitals and, you know, stating that they're a man when actually they're a woman. We don't believe in the video I sent you yesterday in allowing 50-year-old swimmers who pretend they're actually women when they're blokes to be in the same changing room as 13-year-old girls. This is legal, by the way, in Canada. Can I just state, this is an actual thing. You have these swimmers who are identifying as women when they're men, and they're allowed to enter the same changing rooms and get undressed with 13-year-old girls, which under Canada's law is illegal, as a journalist stated, inside said swim centre. But because all the people complicit in this system are pedophiles, and their complicity is a derivative of their positions in the system, no one else can counter it. The law is crumbling every day. And it's not just the law, it's the financial system, it's everything. For people that actually have their eyes open, which I'm sure our audience do, hence why they're listening, we can see it everywhere. It's everything, from the roads to the behavior of the waiters to the behavior of, you know, people that work in government. Just every aspect, the media, everything is completely crumbling, and it's homing in on one outcome. And what is that outcome, James? What do you think the outcome is going to be? And when do you think it's going to happen?
I mean, the outcome
Put you on the spot there.
Some kind of reset or mass destabilization of us. And I believe it's going to happen in the next 6 years.
The magic number.
Indeed.
Oh, yeah, 2030. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. At a push, 2033, but yeah, 2030, I think. I think that's going to be at least where we're going to see some kind of major shift or change. And that destabilization might not necessarily even 100% be mass, you know, physical destruction. That could literally be the date of an implementation of an international digital online monetary system where they get rid of fiat, and even that would be, you know, insane, because at that point everybody's, you know, resources and finances go online, and at that point it's at the behest of whoever controls said database, which is obviously, you know who, and we know that databases can be, you know, hacked, turned off, switched off, etc. There's nothing physical to, even though even fiat currency is practically worthless, as we know, because it's not matched against the gold standard and hasn't been for, I don't know, maybe like 100 years or so. But yeah, it'll be, you know, countless times worse. It will be countless times more vulnerable once that autonomy or that financial autonomy goes and it goes online. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Well, where would you say it's going?
Well, I think there are two kind of directions, and we were just speaking about this on the WhatsApp call before we started this podcast. But they're both bad, of course. It's only bad, but one is significantly worse. The two options are A, everyone dies. And I know that sounds really crazy, and let me explain. There is like a logic behind that. And we've discussed it before. You know, realistically, we are not needed as people. We were always sheep. We were always flesh utilized for a purpose, i.e. to reconstruct the previous reset. That's how they operate. They breed and they promote birth rates, baby boomer scenario, that kind of stuff. Post-apocalypse, post-war, when everyone has literally been decimated. And again, it's, you know, debatable as to whether we're all test tube babies. It's very possible, actually. We've seen, assuming these pictures and evidences are correct,
Mhm.
Pictures from the 1920s, from theme parks, which are an interesting topic. And I think Michelle Gibson
Mm.
goes into that kind of stuff, and Illuminate Illusions, where they had all kinds of very futuristic incubators and all this kind of stuff. And again, we know that technology is kept by those that govern and slowly released, so slowly funneled into society when needs be. But realistically, everything is already known about all, for the most part. Those that are deemed Egyptian were simply just ourselves at a previous era of reset, and that the technologies that they had are the technologies that we probably have now, or
Mhm.
far, far, far more superior to what we have now. So
Exactly.
either we all die, and I don't think we're at that point yet. And I'll tell you why. Because in order for us all to die, you need people. You need the police, you need the military, you need the people flying the drones, you need the people checking the CCTV cameras, you need all these. You need a certain number of people to ensure that the processes that they wish to pin on the rest of society are, efficiently undertaken. If you alienate the society too much, if there's too much anarchy and too much devastation, well, then you can't implement the policies. The only reason that would happen is if there is no reason to implement any policies, because we're already at the end game, and that's what the debate is. That's the question of the two directions. Are they going to release another Pi variant of the COVID scam? Probably. Or does Pi stand for something else? And I think actually, looking into Decoding Our Realities videos, I think one thing that is missed is that there's an emphasis on the biological warfare aspect. These variants of so-called viruses, which are all scams, of course, when actually Pi could stand for something else. And I think he did allude to it in the video. Whether you're up to that point or not, I'm not sure. But Pi is obviously, a term shared by the president of China, and it could just be a symbol of a coming war. It doesn't. It's certainly an event. I agree with Decoding Our Realities channel on that. Pi is going to be, you know, involved somewhere, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a variant of a virus or a so-called virus. It could just be a symbol of warfare, a coming war with China, a mass devastation. But returning to the point about, the two directions, I think that I don't see that we're at a point yet where total decimation is necessary. And I could be wrong. I think it's going to be a case of unleashing some kind of new conflict, whether that's in the form of a virus or in the form of this third world war, that's going to decimate a sizable proportion of society. Actually, indirectly, because it's not going to be a derivative of the battlefields, though the battlefields themselves will, of course, be a slaughterhouse, eradicating those that are essentially political enemies, given that algorithmic kind of data sets are so advanced. Every person has a profile. Every person has a digital passport, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
and it's from that they will decide who gets culled and who doesn't. It's very much aligned to their other system, which they abruptly ended in the early 90s. The Soviet Union, that was a test, a beta. The system's the exact same thing. Everyone has a profile. You don't reach certain points on your credit system, your credit profile, like in China, you get thrown into the fucking gulag. You get thrown into the front line in Russia or Taiwan or wherever. And that's what's going to happen. And again, it's that replacement, I feel, of society from one that's homogenous or more homogenous, because homogeny, or if that's how you pronounce the word, is something that obviously goes against international communism, globalism, kind of monopolistic endeavor. And when you eradicate that, you're left with just lots of different toppings on a pizza. A kind of analogy I've used before, and these can be altered at will, and people are no longer kind of cohesive and are just bickering amongst one another for different reasons, or different religions and races and kind of belief systems, cultural practices, all kind of swirled into one cup. It's what they want. It is what they want.
Yeah. Swirling. It's like, I don't know. Let's just say you've got, like, a stew. Stews tend to have lots of different components. Bit of lamb, bit of carrot, bit of potato, bit of swede. Um,
I haven't heard Swede in a while.
yeah. It's that's ironic that Swede is also a type of human as well. But it's, I don't see that as much of an issue as I think ideology is the main issue, and it's like I would prefer somebody from the Andaman Islands or from, you know, the north of Finland who has the same values as me as somebody who's my next door neighbor that doesn't have the same, you know, kind of values. So I think that that's something that should be prioritized, you know, above all, because as I said, I was like, you know, traveling back from Paris, and you know, I was on the train and I was like on the tube and seeing all these like of all different shapes, sizes of colors, these people with fucking studs in their lips, rings through their noses, like all kinds of strange piercings, tattoos, you know, with a very, you know, bizarre, you know, sense of dress. And it's like that is the stew that said, like, the like particles are attracted to like the like particles, and they always will be. So yeah, I mean, even in like a, you know, a more like, you know, homogenous society, you'll have, you know, groups and factions that share, you know, said, you know, belief systems. I know, just for example, just for argument, in Ireland, you know, there might be, let's just say in a rural part of Ireland, there'll still be like a paedophile ring that exists there. Then you've got people who don't, you know, partake. There'll be like maybe a group of vigilantes in the same village. You know, people people are just generally, you know, cunts, like, in every aspect. People, yeah, there's just like I think there's the same ratio of cunts in like in every demographic, from male, female to, you know, different religions, etc. So yeah, I don't think them swirling people together is a problem, because like will essentially find like. Um, but absolutely, through like the weirdnesses, like through like, you know, giving people all these different, you know, gender assignments and putting that in the schools, that's a good way to divide, slice and dice, take away the natural order of things. Um, yeah, I think that's the primary way that they'll be able to divide people.
Yeah, but you can't deny that. So I'm not saying that you won't find characters with shared similarities from across the pond, from far off distant lands. You know, share similarities that are more potent and greater than what you'll find within your local neighborhood. But realistically, on an average, most people are going to have something more shared with those from the same jurisdiction, the same land, the same nation, than from, say, Pakistan or India. You know, although, well, the UK is sizably Indian or Pakistani now, just using that as an example. But if you have a, and I say this kind of comically, but you know, that's the, I guess, the traditional brand, kind of the typical Anglo-Saxon Briton is probably going to have more in common with someone from the immediate periphery, and then someone from a country closest, so probably like Normandy in France, or maybe Germanic or Slavic countries, over, let's say, I don't know, Malaysia or Papua New Guinea, or, you know, Burundi or Mexico, these kinds of places. You know, realistically, the cultural similarities are going to be more distinct the closer people
Absolutely.
are to. So, but when, you know, it's like too many cooks spoil the broth. It's like your analogy of the stew. Well, we know the ingredients that go into a stew to make the stew generally suitable for consumption. Now, you can put a bit of paprika in there, and that's fine, you know, and then you can put something else in there, and it's probably going to be fine as well. But the more stuff you put in the stew, you're increasing the probability and the likelihood that you're going to make something that is very, very distasteful. Now, there's always going to be the chance that it's going to turn out to be some miraculous Michelin-style dish that's, you know, the next big thing. But realistically, the likelihood of it not being that is far, far higher. And again, through example, I don't think we see any societies in the world where this kind of mass stew pot stirring is successful. And how do we define success? Well, I'm not looking at whether there's a Turkish, an Indian, a Pakistani, a Mexican, Nigerian restaurant on the same corner. People see those as positives, and yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But what's important is that there is a constant awareness that the government doesn't care about the society, and the ability for people to kind of see that through kind of living in a homogenous kind of atmosphere, I think is far more likely than, let's say, if you live on a street where you've got 20 different languages and you can't interact with those around you, and people have different perspectives because they come from countries where it's okay to hang a woman in the back garden and beat her with a stick. If that's the case, if they are from Saudi Arabia, your neighbors, and they sponsor ideals that would most likely be very illegal in Western developed countries, what's the likelihood that you're going to be able to relate to them on something far more simple, like the next policy that's being implemented by the government or whatever it is? Not that that matters, because all governments corrupt, but just as an example, it's you're increasing the probability that it's going to be unfeasible, and that's why just homogenous societies are generally those where people have very tightly knit value sets. And people say it's unhealthy, but I mean, what is health? The economic arguments.
I think it is.
Yeah, but how so? So let me give one example. Iceland, right? Iceland is an island. To be honest,
Very high
Iceland,
suicide rate.
yeah, but they never have had a need to interact with anywhere else in the world, period. So you have an island, they have lots of fish, pretty intelligent, decent education system. It was functioning relatively well. And then, of course, corruption came into place, and Russian banking systems and all kinds of things crashed it during the financial collapse. And now when you go to Iceland, probably most people aren't even Icelandic that you'll see. And I'm not just talking about tourists. They started bringing in the same policies because, again, European kind of aura, the globalist framework, you don't have to be in the EU to sponsor it. It's all one banner, essentially, that controls. They started bringing in Afghans and Syrians. Like, why the fuck would you? You live on an island where you're pretty well off. Your currency is above most others in the world, pretty good lifestyle, and you start bringing in Afghans and Syrians and all this. And the people don't really have a choice, of course, because it's
what was the official reason for bringing these people in? Was it just like a refugee?
It's the classic refugee, and we say that in inverted commas because these people aren't refugees, but it's the classic refugee scenario. And just to reiterate for the audience, again, they probably know, you're not a refugee 90% of the time. The official policy is if you're fleeing a country, and it shouldn't even be a policy either, it's exactly what you should be doing if you are trying to safeguard yourself and your family and you're in a genuine scenario of threat and violence. You leave your country, you go to the immediate country next door, or if that country's in a conflict, whichever country doesn't have conflict is where you're supposed to stop. And under EU regulations, that's it. And most of those countries are Greece, Italy, Spain, Bulgaria. People coming from Turkey across the Mediterranean, these are all EU countries. These countries don't have war. They've got a pretty good, lifestyle in comparison to, let's say, places like Syria or Iraq or wherever there's a conflict zone. So why is it that all these people seem to make it through nearly every European Union country to places like France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, and as far off as Sweden, Norway, and Iceland? Because none of them are refugees. They're all economic migrants, and they're all being imported for the reason of dividing society, but from a very atypical economic standpoint, which isn't truthful at all. It's because we have a declining birth rate and that we need cheap labor and all this kind of stuff. And that's the real reason. We're told the consumerism, you need more people to buy the products that the corporations are selling you. If the population goes down, the corporation's stock and share value plummets and they go out of business, essentially. Of course, these businesses aren't real because they have infinite capital and they're sponsored by companies like BlackRock and Vanguard, who are a derivative of Rothschild's central banking policy, and therefore money is unlimited. So the idea that there is even a profit kind of ratio at hand is not true. The aim is to dilute homogenous societies with people that share absolutely nothing in common with them, to create division, to create anarchy, and to just reduce the general economic outlay of said countries, which in turn reduces the rate of education, which in turn creates divide and criminality and all these kinds of things. Because, you know, generally speaking, poverty is still synonymous with, let's say, unstable surrounds. When people are strained, when they have to work longer hours to put bread on their plates for their families, you're not going to be thinking about, you know, what policy is being introduced by the government the next week. It's all about distraction. It's all about maximizing kind of human endeavor in a kind of, not in a progressive intellectual way, but just taking time from people's pockets so that there's nothing left at the end of the day. That's what I believe.
In regards to like the actual, you know, these people that are moving around, if I was coming from, I don't know, just Syria or, you know, somewhere with warm weather, I probably wouldn't want to stop at Iceland either. I'd probably think, yeah, let me go to somewhere that, you know, has a good economy, that has a good population, that's, you know, maybe multicultural. I can find a community there where there are people that speak, you know, whichever language, Arabic, you know, and these sorts of things, where the weather is better, where they have 4 seasons at least, where I get 3 months of sunshine, like back home. So I suppose it makes sense to have ambition. So from the point of view of the person moving, it's like, yeah, you got to aim for the stars, aim for the UK, the US.
Oh, completely.
Yeah, these places where you're, you know, sold the dream. So from their point of view, I can see why. And let's just say, even if I was a criminal from Syria or, you know, Lebanon or somewhere like this, it's like, yeah, absolutely, yeah, let me get out and you know, go to England and, yeah, start something there, get a new slate and try and, you know, and do things there. But modern societies still have their issues anyway, so it's like will always attract to like people who are of a, you know, criminal inclination will, you know, go anywhere and do crime. That's just, and people that aren't of that inclination, you know, they'll, you know, go somewhere and probably add to that society. So essentially it's just people being people.
No, I would say they're
They're definite.
criminals. They're all
Yeah,
criminals.
what I would agree with, is that absolutely migration can be used, and at least the popularization of it can be used to, you know, create, you know, sentiment and, you know, sort of resentment and divide. Because, yeah, you know, it's like, yeah, there's an element of tribalism that, you know, just tends to exist amongst people when things are different. Absolutely. um it's normally like, you know, a sizable minority that will, you know, actually, you know, get in a conflict, but it definitely is something that can divide and, you know, and is there. um how that's facilitated and whether it's organic and something that's used, I mean, it's definitely, in terms of the policies, they're not organic, but on the surface they're claiming to be more strict on migration and immigration. In terms of the actual, you know, numbers and how that stacks up is yeah, it's different. The reality of it's different. But yeah, officially speaking, there are, you know, they're clamping down on, you know, on such movements. Yeah,
But
it'll
that's
be interesting.
Masonic mockery, of course. You remember opposites. They say one thing, they do the other. It's all an inside joke.
Yeah, they do that, but I think it's obviously important to find evidence of them doing that.
Well,
So
walking down any street in the UK should be sufficient evidence. I mean, haven't we seen that London is, what's the percentage of Brits in London, and the police force? What is it that they're doing with the police force? Didn't we have this conversation, London Met?
yeah, they stopped
The
that, and like they did it for like, I don't know, 1 year, and then they stopped it because, yeah, there was, it just didn't make any sense.
Well,
Uh,
no, yeah, of course, because
yeah,
it's openly not just anti-British. It's basically racist. It is racist. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
employing someone based on their race, not on their accolades. It's racism.
yeah. I mean, it's strange because it's like obviously racism implemented by, or discrimination implemented by, um, yeah, people that aren't of the the race that they're promoting, for example. So the people who are making, the decision to let's do positive discrimination for the police force and prioritize ethnic minorities if everything's the same, then to meet a quota. And once and see, like, the thing that didn't make sense is that, go back to the numbers again. If you're gonna say, okay, we want a force to match the demographic of the population, then you need to be quite meticulous about that. Let's just say the population of London is 2% Polish, 6% Black, 10% Pakistani, 1%, South and Central American, etc. Then these this positive discrimination should be done to those proportions. Once you meet, that quota, then that should be it. There shouldn't be, say, 20% Black if only maybe 5% is. I mean, if that's the way, if you want to be, fair with your positive discrimination based on meeting a quota based on the population's demographic, then that's the way that it needs to be done in order to,
Yeah, but that policy
be
doesn't make
logical.
sense.
But
But it
it
doesn't
doesn't.
make sense for two reasons. Positive discrimination, I'm sure you don't agree with that, but that's an oxymoron. That's like non-murder murder. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's
And the
when you say
second thing is it's racism, isn't it? It's judging someone by, it's a different form of racism, and not the racism that people are losing their jobs based on their race. That is also racist, and that's one aspect of it that we just said. But the idea that you are to be judged and given a lift up because of your race, because you don't feel that certain people of certain races are capable of getting the job based on their accolades, you have to give them a leg up based on their racial distinction. It is a dual racism, and it's completely ridiculous. But of course they know this. Of course they know this.
yeah. So the thing is, they weren't saying that you had to meet a certain standard in order to, yeah, be preferred, against somebody else. So
Against someone
it
that's
was,
white, basically.
yeah,
Because that's
it was talking about the metropolitan
yeah.
police.
Well, all
You
the
know,
police, in essence, because they're all operating under the same banner. It's just London
yeah,
sets
no,
the trend for all,
yeah. Well, I know it was the Met that were doing it specifically,
at least openly.
and yeah, it didn't make sense. They brought it in and scrapped it, but I think they did their job by publicizing it, because it
Oh,
kind of
completely. Yeah.
is naturally gonna, rob people. It's like, oh, let's like rob people, and people are gonna remember the headline. They did run it for a year. It was like a token gesture, because they love a bit of tokenism when it comes to these sorts of things, and yeah,
I mean, I would say not just a token gesture, even if that at all, but more of a psychological operation to create division.
oh, it's
And
a
the same
psyop
thing is
fully.
with the conscription thing a few days ago. Some fucking, I think, general of staff in the UK came out and said, "Oh yeah, we're going to need conscription. We're going to need to start, invoking conscription policies similar to in First and Second World War standards." And then the next day, the government came out and they were like, "Yeah, we're not going to do that." But it's already worked. I mean, they are the
Yeah, because
government. The general staff is the fucking government. As if he would say that without permission from the government in the first place. Of course, they're all part of the same shillery imaginable. I was literally foaming at the teeth, and I saw the guy's interview, or one of their interviews. I would love to chop his fucking head off in a fantasy world for YouTube.
yeah, in a car,
in
like
a
to make an
in a
animation.
legal video game like Red
Yeah,
Dead Redemption, I would like to do something like that. Wink, wink. But yeah, so I mean, these people are completely evil, of course. They're completely sadistic, and again, it's a psychological operation. And they know full well that they can conscript people, and they will conscript people into the army because they've done it 1,000 times before. They do it every single war, and they certainly will do it. And I think Silas, I'm just kind of imitating what Silas has already said in the video, but we were already thinking this, beforehand, because again, I think the closer you get to the end game, and with the awareness that we have and our audience have, and when these things that are topical become topical every day, there's only so many things that can happen. It is really like a chess game or any game. The further you get, there's only so many things that you can play. And there's now only so many ways that they can go. And in my opinion, it returns to what we were saying about the two directions. Either you wipe out the global population, which they can do. They have done it in the past and they will do it. We don't have any value to them, of course, aside from labor, which can be replaced and is being replaced and probably has always been possible to replace with, robotic systems, AI, etc. But yeah, it really boils down to that idea of, is it going to be the kind of the short straw or the long straw? But it's a straw nonetheless. And what would you say is the best thing to do about it? And I think we've touched on this in previous videos, but I think I don't want our channel to be hypocritical, or not hypocritical. Yeah, sort of hypocritical and contradictory, because many people talk about these kinds of things, and they probably don't always go as deep as some of the channels that we look and watch, and what the things that we discuss. But there's no purpose to discussion unless we can provide possible solutions and ways out. And I know this is a kind of replication of what we've already kind of talked about beforehand, but I think it is important to push the idea that living domestically in one place isn't the way to persevere against this coming scenario.
Definitely contradictory.
Yeah.
But
no, absolutely. I mean, we can't be the ones just sitting in the fucking chair saying,
we go and
the
jump in
world's going
different
to...
stews, basically, and and add a bit of flavour to places. And through that, we also add flavour to our own lives, don't we? So.
Completely. But if it is the 6-year time period, and it's certainly going to be 2030, 2033, that something big is going to happen, I don't disbelieve that. It's 100% in my books, just based on the numerology alone. It has to be the case that certain things happen in 30 and 33. They wouldn't have it any other way. They do it every day. But for sure, in the coming period and now and years ago, in the last, 20, 30, 40 years, and probably the last 100 years, it's been pretty wild. So, but this is the kind of climax of it all. People, and I don't want to, be the fear mongerer, but people need to start fucking leading. Like, people need to just grab their balls and actually do something with them. Throw them down the track and stop being a bunch of peas sitting in their houses playing fucking, I don't know, just demoralizing video games and watching Netflix, when they can actually get out and do something. And I'm not saying it can be changed domestically, politically, conventionally, because it can't. And obviously there's so many things, hence the reference to the Red Dead head chopping, that I would love to say. But of course, we can't say these things on the internet, because we live in a censored society, and that should be sufficient enough for even the most meager of brains to discern that there is no free system at place, and that we're all handed a game created by a centralized system of overseers. But I think the next objective is we should start meeting people. I was thinking about this the other day. People that are interested should start getting together and formulating physically in person an exchange of ideas, because if that isn't to happen, then we kind of are contradicting ourselves, understanding, as we all do, that technology, the way it's progressing, and I say that in inverted commas, moving, is certainly not healthy for society, and it's not intended to be. It's intended to demoralize and segregate and create a system where people no longer have the social capabilities to interact with one another and consequently understand the problems at hand. Everything is going to be an online-based, betaized soy boy system, which it already is to a large extent. So we need to start getting together and meeting people, I think.
Yeah. And what would be the aim? Like, when you say for people to meet, in just to be around people, like, what would be the purpose of meeting? Just to be around like-minded people, but then at that point, what would the like-minded people do? What would your vision be?
Well, again, I can say everything in the vision on YouTube. But I think actually the basis of just the meet is the socialization, indeed the exchange of ideas, exchanging beliefs with those that may hold similar kind of understandings of life, which essentially is what they're destroying now and what we were just talking about it. You know, we've reversed, we're coming at it from a different angle. So this is how societies were created. You know, you'd have two people foraging in the trees, both looking to fucking take peaches off the trees. And they'd be like, oh, you're taking peaches off the tree. I'm taking peaches off the tree. Oh, I live in this area. Oh my God, that's great. Why don't we work together? That kind of thing. You know, that's how communities were formed. That's how empires were formed. That's how nations were formed. Families, all these kinds of things come from a kind of a shared bond. And without that desire, let's say, to at least attempt and try, irrespective of whether you think it's going to succeed, at progressing, because it is progression, and also it is progression from ignoring and acknowledging that it's good to ignore the system at hand. I heard a telephone there. That sounds very office-like. There's no point to any of these conversations. No point to any of these conversations at all. We need to create a... oh, is HelloFresh at your door?
Yeah, somebody is.
It's probably the state knocking on your door. They've probably got a pistol behind their back and shoot you in the head. I'll be on the speaker though. Okay, for the audience, James is just checking to see who's going to pop him in the head with a 9mm. A Mel Gibson Beretta from the 80s Lethal Weapon series, no doubt.
Yeah.
Still alive?
On that note, we've done 1 minute.
Yeah, so we'll I guess we'll call it, and we'll have to initiate these meetups, I think, at some point. If and when I return to the UK, then perhaps it is time for an operation to be implemented whereby we at least start meeting for discussions and general outlooks on where to take this scenario. What's the next step?
Yep.
Would you agree?
Indeed, yep. I agree. Solutions are what's needed.
100%. And because James is fearful for his life, we shall end on that. And this has been episode 19. And episode 20 will be at some point, probably next week. Is that about right, James?
Maybe in a few days.
In a few days? Well, no, I'll be on a boat again. I've got to take 5 days boat. So 1st to 5th, and then I'm flying on the 5th to Sao Paulo, and then so from late on the 5th, 6th, I'll be free for a little while, and then it's the Rio Carnival.
Yep. Okay then. Until then,
au revoir.
Episode 20. See you then.
See you for episode 20. Ta-ta.